Welcome to On the Beat, where we bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter every week, exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network.
Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome everybody into On the Beat, brought to you exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe. My name is Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired, alongside my co-host, sitting right next to me, the Big O, Jerry Ostrowski, who you can find on Twitter at Ostrowski_Big O. We're so glad to have you guys with us. Please do us a favor. Please please subscribe, whatever platform you are tuned into live right now. If you can subscribe, please do. If you can like it, please do. And if you're listening to this in post as a podcast, same thing. Please do us a favor. Please please subscribe. We would super much appreciate that. The Buffalo Bills season is right around the corner. The Buffalo Bills are hosting the Chicago Bears this week for their first exhibition game of the 2024 season. It looks like we're going to see Caleb Williams at least for a snap or two. And as we do every single week, we promise to bring you a Buffalo Bills beat reporter, and we've got one this week. The other half of the Shout Buffalo podcast works for New York State Up and Syracuse.com. And if I'm not mistaken, you are a professor at St. Bonaventure University. That is correct, yes?
No, professor at Bonas. A proud alum, though.
Alumnus. Okay, I knew there was a connection there, but I wasn't exactly sure. That was literally just shooting from the hip on that one. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show Ryan Talbot. Ryan, how is this cool, unseasonably odd this summer cool day treating you?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, pretty stormy, so it's kept me from mowing the yard, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But
that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, but definitely needs to get done in the next few days. But I'm enjoying a little bit of a cool down. It's been a really nice summer, but a cool day mixed in here and there is not the worst thing in the world.
Awesome. Jerry, how are you?
Doing well. I am in the opposite end of the spectrum. We're at 103 today, day number 12 in the triple digits. And yes, we're going to have, like I said to you earlier, we're going to have a little bit of a cold snap this weekend and early next week. We're going to drop into the upper 80s and low to mid 90s. So yes, we're going to have to break the jackets out next week.
Winter coat, the yellow Keon Coleman bubble jackets is what.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, as I was just saying, the Buffalo Bills have their first exhibition game this week at home against the Chicago Bears with rookie Caleb Williams. We're being told is going to play quarterback. I don't know if you've got any more information on that, Ryan, at all, but outside of what I've heard. But what are you hearing, feeling, breathing, sensing? Like, what are you getting from that?
Yeah, I saw one Bears beat reporter say that he might play up to the first quarter. And again, it's every coach's discretion in the preseason. You want to get your rookie out there, get him some reps with the O-line and with some of the weapons he's going to be playing with this year. And, on paper, they do have a lot of good weapons in Chicago. They've set him up for success a lot better than they ever did Justin Fields. So it's going to be fun to watch and see how he performs it, on the road. It's preseason, so it's not as rowdy, obviously, as a regular season game, but it'll be loud at Highmark Stadium on Saturday afternoon.
Well, Ryan, I got to ask, you talk about the preseason, we talk about the Bears, we expect to see Caleb Williams and the likes, but how about in Buffalo? Any word on who we'll see in that home uniform as far as the Bills roster goes, veteran-wise? Obviously, rookies and younger guys will play quite a bit. Are we going to see Josh Allen, not see Josh Allen? Who do you expect to see on Saturday night?
Yeah, we haven't been told anything official just yet on, the starters, who will play, who won't play. We probably will get word from Sean McDermott either tomorrow or Thursday at training camp about who will play. Josh Allen didn't play last year in the first preseason game. So, unless you're really concerned about the snap exchange, I don't anticipate him being out there in this first matchup. I think you're going to get a lot of Mitch Trubisky, Shane Buechele, which is A-okay because, in Buffalo, the fans know what they have in Josh Allen. This coaching staff knows what they have in Josh Allen. This is going to be a very valuable game for guys, though, that are, maybe on the right side of the roster bubble or even on the wrong side. Guys like Tyrell Shavers, who has had a great camp, Zach Davidson on offense, Kyer Elam to continue his great camp. Obviously, he's a lock, but he's had such a great camp that I want to see him now against another team and see how he plays out there. So a lot of guys are going to get some valuable reps on Saturday. I wouldn't anticipate a lot of the bigger names in Buffalo, though, playing too much.
Would you say Shavers is the guy that everybody's fallen in love with this year? I mean, everybody falls in love with one player every preseason. He's the guy.
I think he is the guy.
Shavers this year. Yeah,
he is the guy, and he's earned that right of being the guy this summer. You've seen him get some first team reps. You've seen him perform well one-on-one against Ross Sewell. Douglas had a win on Sunday, coming back on an out route for a nice pass. Had Taron Johnson draped over him in an 11-on-11 period, made a catch. So he's performing well when the ball comes his way against the best that the Bills have. He's made that steady ascension up the depth chart. So, yeah, he's probably one. And then I think Zach Davidson's the other guy that has stood out at camp for all the right reasons. Right. And all of a sudden there's a lot of Bills fans clamoring about how do you not have this guy on your roster, which that'll be a discussion I'm sure we'll have tonight.
So, quick question from a name that we haven't heard a whole lot from, which is Shane Buechele, the third string quarterback in Buffalo. What have you seen? What have you heard? What have you read? Now, the third string quarterback is never asked to do much in this offense outside of just being kind of like a dude that's close to the hip of Josh Allen, at least over the last 4 years or so. Is this a guy that's got some talent? What have you seen? What have you heard? Is this a guy that's going to possibly stick? Matt Barkley, if I'm not mistaken, is one of Josh's best friends, a guy that he trusts. Are we going to see Shane probably get maybe knocked out, and then a guy like Matt Barkley, somebody that's close, like even a Kyle Allen again coming? I don't know where Kyle Allen is, if he's even on a roster right now. I guess the question is he going to stick on the practice squad, or are we going to see the Bills bring in one of Josh's buds?
I could see him sticking on the practice squad. He was there last season. The Bills liked the development in his game. He youngish player, someone that you can possibly develop over the next few years. And I don't know if he'll ever be a quarterback 2 in this league or with Buffalo. Obviously, they have Trubisky under contract this year and next, so it's not a problem that they have to worry about in terms of that backup position. But, I'd rather than roll the dice on a young guy and try to bring that person along than bring in one of, Josh's buddies, like you said, like a Barkley or something like that, who you already know what their ceiling is. They're on the back end of their careers. That's not to say that, Buechele is a guy that has to be a lock here. If there's another young guy that gets cut somewhere else across the league, the Bills had a high grade on a few years ago, pre-draft or something, that they can't go that route either. But, he has a good rapport with Josh Allen, with Mitch Trubisky. When I've been at camp and they're doing the target practice into the nets, they all seem to be getting along very well. Buechele's done a fine job with the third team offense. The O-line's been a little bit of a concern there, so we haven't necessarily seen the best of Buechele, but that hasn't necessarily been his fault either.
You got to think at some point in time, the Buffalo. I mean, one thing there's not going to be in this town for a long time is a quarterback controversy. You got to think it's very akin to Jim Kelly, a guy that Jerry played with, right? Frank was on the bench and Frank could win games. And he was a guy that the Bills had. You got to feel like the Bills at some point in time are going to stop with this kind of rotating round table of second string guy and find a dude and develop a second stringer. That's just a personal thought to me. I mean, the round table thing works, but maybe they're spending a little more money there than they even need to, trying to take some of these guys that maybe haven't panned out in the league versus finding a guy, draft a dude in the 4th, 5th round, develop him to be your second string quarterback and kind of move from there, right?
Yeah, I think this is maybe the upcoming draft in 2025 where they do that. They have a lot of picks already set aside for 2025. You take a mid-round flyer on a guy that you want to develop. Even some of these late-round guys, obviously, we've seen, and system matters, but Brock Purdy, there's not a ton of Brock Purdy's that come along, but he was perfect for the Shanahan system. Yeah. But they can find a guy, and I think that in 2025 draft, that's maybe the route you go because you have Trubisky under contract for one more year for that 2025 season. Then you hope over the course of the third stringer's rookie year that he shows enough where you don't have to go out into the free agent market and bring in a higher paid backup. Trubisky's not breaking the bank, but he's still getting a decent salary in Buffalo. They could go with that rookie. And then if they wanted to bring in a third veteran closer to the minimum, they could obviously do that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Bills have had some injury issues throughout camp, especially in the safety room. McDermott this week actually talked a little bit in a press conference that he is concerned about some things. Any updates on any of the injuries that the Bills have gotten in training camp?
Yeah, today was an off day, so no updates since yesterday, but still both of the safeties, Mike Edwards, Cole Bishop, there week to week. They're a little dinged up in the linebacker room. The scrimmage on Friday, or the practice on Friday at the stadium. Ulofoshio left towards the end of practice with an injury, made a nice stop in toward the goal line and was hurt on the play. Nicholas Moreau had left about 10 minutes before that. So they're dinged up in a few spots. Ty Johnson remains out. Chase Claypool. It's a little bit longer of an injury list, but most of them are at least day-to-day, which is encouraging. And, for those players, it's encouraging too, because they need to be on the field for these 3 preseason games, or at least 2 of them, if they're going to make a case for a roster spot. But I think tomorrow we'll probably get the latest update. I'm sure some of those day-to-day guys could be back at camp, which, again, it's what you're hoping for and trending so you can see them play in meaningful snaps.
You feel like some of these guys, it's imperative that they get on the field. And one of those guys is Chase Claypool, right? This wide receiver room has been a whirlwind of emotions up and down from, the Stephon Diggs debacle to they'll never trade him. He's going to be a Bill. Then he gets traded. Then they don't take a guy in the first round because Brian Thompson Jr. goes before him, to Keon Coleman, to who are these guys? Like, we're just all to like, now they look great. And then, MBS is dropping passes this week. And then you've got Claypool that's hurt, that toe injury. How much is that making it a disaster? How badly does he need to get back on the field with his toe injury? I guess is the question I want to ask.
Yeah, I think he really needs to get back on the field, because the Bills realistically could go 5 wide receivers if they wanted to. And if they do that, they might already be locked in terms of, the top 3. I would have Matt Collins at 4. You could make the argument for MVS for number 5 because of the guarantees in his contract, but the Bills have also cut players in the past with guarantees. OJ Howard comes to mind.
Yep.
Moved on just this offseason from Diggs, who had a lot of guaranteed money in different situation, but money's not all the be all end all. But Tyrell Shavers has definitely passed him in my eyes on the depth chart. And, Claypool, he's big, he's physical. He has 2 good seasons of NFL production his first 2 years in the league, which I thought, going into training camp, the Bills would value that. He would have a good chance to be that wide receiver 6. But he's been dealing with this toe injury. It's kept him off the field, and it's allowed other guys to really step up.
And I think the problem, too, with Shavers is, last year you could hide him a little bit.
Yep.
If he goes out and plays well in the preseason on top of what he's done in camp, word's out. Now, all of a sudden, you have a guy that if they do put him on that waiver list, could very easily be picked up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've heard people around the league talk about how scouts are assigned to look on social media during the summer months and see what the beat guys are and women are reporting about players at camps, because when rosters get trimmed down, there are some rosters that are, Super Bowl contenders, but there are others where they're not. And they want these young guys to come in, fight for roster spots, fight for playing time. And a guy like Shavers is going to be high on some lists based on how he's performed this summer. And, if I'm Buffalo, it's going to be very hard to hide him. I don't know if they would necessarily go the route of not playing him much in the preseason as a way to kind of keep him hidden in terms of production against other teams. I think they want to get him out there to see how he does against other competition more than anything else. Say, can this guy really be someone that should make our 53-man roster? A guy that we could trust to give a game day jersey to if there's an injury. If you are the last wide receiver, you might be inactive quite a few games, and that's okay for a guy like Shavers, who spent the entire offseason in Buffalo crafting his game, working on his game. He wanted to focus on special teams because in his mind, making this roster, you need to be able to play special teams. So he worked on that. He worked on getting a little bit stronger, worked on the route running aspect of it. And, when Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott see him going into the facility day in, day out, not leaving Buffalo the entire offseason, that sticks in your mind. And, that doesn't guarantee you a roster spot. But when you come to camp and you're 6'4", you're stronger, your route running is a little bit more crisp. And, oh, by the way, you can also contribute on special teams. That certainly helps his case.
Yeah. So you look at, you got to feel like Claypool's playing this weekend, right? Shavers is going to play. We're going to see a lot of these young guys, and Justin Shorter's another guy the Bills could potentially sneak off, onto the practice squad. But we've seen guys the Bills have tried to sneak onto the practice squad and be successful with it, and then they get plucked in the past. When you're watching the game this weekend, when the Bears come into town, who are your eyes focused on? Like position groups, players, and like who do you have the notepad out for? Like, this is the guy I'm looking to watch.
Yeah, I already mentioned Shavers. Again, this is a golden opportunity for him to prove himself against another NFL team.
Yeah.
It's one thing to perform at training camp, and he's going against the best that the Bills have, like I mentioned earlier, Russell Douglas, Taron Johnson. So it's not like he's going against the third team guys. He's performing against the best, but you want to see it on tape against another team.
Right.
So that's big for him. Zach Davidson, who is really fighting for that tight end 3 spot. I like Davidson's game coming into the summer. I didn't necessarily think he was going to make this push for the tight end 3. It's still going to be harder for him to make the roster because of the whole special teams aspect of it. This is a Bills team that lost some key special teams contributors to free agency this past season. And Quentin Morris is a guy that is one of their core special teams players. So it's something to evaluate. Now, when it comes to Davidson, let's just say he has a great preseason as well. Could the Bills carry 4 tight ends? It's not, something you usually see teams do. But at the stadium on Friday night, they did tinker with some 3 tight end sets. It's possible in that regard, and you could cut elsewhere. You could trim 1 D lineman off the roster or D tackle if you needed to. You could go 1 less at wide receiver. It really depends on the personnel packages, because in the Bills' mind, they have to be thinking, okay, we are set in terms of our top 2 tight ends with Kincaid and Knox, but Knox has been a little bit dinged up over the last few years, missed some time last year with the wrist injury. Kincaid obviously just entering year 2, but if either of those guys go down, who are you going to feel more confident playing tight end snaps? Is it going to be Morris, or is it going to be Davidson, 6'7", athletic, sneaky in terms of being able to find holes in the zones, get open for Josh Allen and other quarterbacks this summer? So he's really elevated his game. Kyrie Elam's on my list. I want to see if he can carry that over. Javon Solomon is another player I'm excited about. He was very quiet early at training camp, and I still liked his odds to make the roster. He was a mid-round pick for this team, but you obviously have Von Miller. You have Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa. Smoot has come on and had a very nice camp. He's a guy that I had on the opposite side of the roster bubble entering training camp. He was kind of quiet in the spring, but he's come on nicely. So now Solomon, you need to show that you're worth keeping on this 53-man roster. He's had a few sacks at the last few training camp practices. You're starting to see that speed, the bend. He has a little bit more strength than I think people give him credit for, too. One of his best plays early in camp when he flashed for the first time was a power move to drive an O-lineman back. So he's coming on. I want to see if he can get after the quarterback. Second, third team quarterback of the Bears. Ray Davis, I want to see. He's had some monster runs. I love Ty Johnson. I think he did a lot of things really well last season when the Bills called upon him. But this is a great opportunity for Davis to seal that number 2 job this preseason. He's put the ball on the ground twice this summer. That obviously will put him in, the short-term doghouse in Buffalo. We've seen it before with backs. But he's shown himself to be a really good blocker as a rookie. If you can stay in, protect your quarterback on blitz packages, that's going to get you on the field. He catches the ball extremely well, and he moves extremely well. And then the last one I'm watching is La'el Collins, which is the other end of the spectrum. Does this guy still have it?
Right.
He was banged up recently. He came back to practice on Monday, dealing with a knee injury. You feel bad for the players at the end of their careers where they're wearing the bulky braces. They're not moving the way they once had. This is a player that when you watched him in Dallas early in his career, he was very, very good. You could play him inside, outside. I'm not sure he still has that outside play to his game. He might be strictly more of a guard at this point in his career. And do you lean with a veteran, or do you go with some younger players for that last O-lineman spot or last 2 spots? And, we've seen the development, at least over the years. with the O-lineman here, Alec Anderson last year, Ryan Vandemark. They have young guys who have really ascended their play year 1 to year 2. So maybe you lean the younger route.
Yeah. Ron, I want to expand a little bit on that tight end area with the whole Davidson Morris thing, and kind of get into the blocking aspect of it. I look at Knox. You talked about Knox being a little beat up a little bit later in his career. You got Kincaid, who came into the game not necessarily for his reputation, was not necessarily his blocking, but his pass routes and catching. I see Quentin Morris as kind of the guy that's probably the best blocker of the three, as true end line tight end. Are they comfortable enough with Knox and Kincaid and their blocking that they could possibly move from Morris if they wanted to? And I know we talked about his special teams and bring a Zach Davidson onto the roster, considering just how good he's been in the pass game.
Yeah, that's another aspect of what's going to make the final determination for these roster spots. And you're right, Morris, the way he's built, the way that he blocks, that is one of his strengths. I think that Dawson Knox is a solid blocker too. He's a guy that, reminds me of Kincaid. He came in raw as a blocker, but he's gotten better year after year, where I think the Bills really do trust him as a blocker. Kincaid, I've seen some growth in there, even during his rookie season. He wasn't, a guy that blocked much in college. So I think they have enough faith in those guys that if they had to move on, if Davidson really ascends this preseason and makes that statement, I think they would be okay. Morris didn't play a ton of reps last year on offense, obviously a lot in the special teams area. That's going back to what we alluded to earlier. But to Davidson's credit, he's not built necessarily the same as a Morris. He is 6'7", though. He's a little lankier, but he had a nice rep in the 11-on-11s on Sunday where he pushed Greg Rousseau to the inside, which allowed Josh Allen to scramble for a touchdown to the left sideline. So he's shown some things, flashes as a blocker as well. I need to see a much bigger sample size, obviously. Maybe we get that in the preseason. And if he does a good job, that's going to help his case. If he does struggle, though, blocking, that could be what ultimately keeps him off this roster. Yeah,
talking with Ryan Talbot, Buffalo Bills beat reporter. It's funny because we did a way too early roster projections before camp opened, and some idiot, me, predicted that the Bills might actually just stick with Kincaid and Dawson Knox on the actual roster themselves, go 2 tight ends, and then try to sneak a guy like Davidson onto the practice squad. And then let kind of Quentin Morris go. So there are options, to your point. I can't see them keeping 4, but kind of moving on from that, we keep hearing about Joe Brady and Bobby Babich, just their youthful approach and the excitement that they have. And, Bobby Babich, I think one of his comments in his presser this week is like he has been told to be quiet on the headset because he's talking too much. So I guess the question is, do you see that as a real, does it translate to the field? Are you seeing a difference? Is it the new faces? Is it the new coordinators? Do you see their energy kind of being pumped into these guys?
Yeah, and we'll ultimately know for sure when the games that actually matter begin. But yes, I have seen a lot of energy from both of these players. I called on our Text Insider chat line there. I called Bobby Babich a walking energy drink because this guy starts at 100 and he doesn't go down from it. On the side field, I've been there watching the practices. The defensive unit's been over there. This guy is bouncing around from unit to unit, coaching players up. Spent some one-on-one time with Dwayne Carter, for instance, on Sunday. And, his message to Carter was be consistent, stay consistent. There was a rep where he kind of put his head down and he said, we don't do that here. You got to, keep that head up when you're coming around on this pass rush move, whatever they were working on at the time. Then you see him over at the linebackers and he is monitoring them closely. Bounce. This guy is yelling. If he doesn't like the speed or the tempo of a drill, he lets them know it. They respond well to him.
Wow.
But it's not just him either, though. I've seen a lot from Jamil Adai, for instance, with, the way he's been getting after the defensive backs, the cornerbacks, saying, we bet, you guys better hustle, get to this next field, or else you're going to be, you're not going to be able to get the drinks, get the breathers. We got to keep moving. A lot of high energy guys on that side. Joe Brady obviously is not as, I don't want to say in your face, because that's not how I would describe Babich, but he's not up there in terms of that energy level necessarily that Babich is, maybe in terms of being vocal, but he does bring a good energy to that offensive room. You can see he is now implementing a lot of the stuff that he wants to do, where last year, obviously, your hands are tied when you become the interim OC. You can't just scrap everything and run your offense because there's no time to actually work that in during the practice week and things like that. So he was still running the Ken Dorsey, the Brian Dable type stuff that they had been the past few years. Now you see him using some things that he wants to do. You see him talking with Josh Allen about, what are the plays that you like? What do you want to run? He has great rapport with all the receivers. He has his own gadget guy in Curtis Samuel here who can do everything. So you're seeing a lot of positivity on both sides of the ball.
Ryan, real quick, I know we talked, and I also saw saw some videos of him working with Shavers after practice, doing some things as far as helping with releases and things like that. I want you to, and I don't have this on the list, so I apologize, Joe. Please don't lose your mind. But you brought up a die.
I think I've gone off script a bunch in this so far.
You brought. Come on, you're going to break my train of thought. You talked about a die, the quarterback coach, and I thought it was interesting this week. McDermott made a point in his press conference to say they asked about Elam and his development. Why all of a sudden is he performing it the way he is, like the first round pick that you made him? And he made a couple of interesting comments. He said, new quarterback coach, new techniques. And then he kind of paused and he said, and he has a clean slate. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a very, very interesting comment by Coach McDermott, just kind of expand on that. And as far as a die and his what he's doing to get Elam up to speed and make him that player we all thought he would be.
Yeah, so, obviously he replaces John Butler, and I cannot say one bad thing about John Butler because of the way that he developed a lot of the cornerbacks over his time in Buffalo. Was here from all years. Obviously inherited a guy like Trey White, but he helped Trey White become an all-pro level cornerback. He developed young players like Benford, like Dane Jackson, who's gone off and got a nice deal elsewhere in free agency. So, Butler was great, but when it came to Kaiir Elam, I think, one, you drafted a guy that played mostly man defense in college, and you throw him into this room and say, well, you're going to play zone now, a lot of zone. Right. And it didn't necessarily carry over the first few years. Elam was overly physical, which I think really, probably bothered Butler, definitely bothered McDermott. You could see at times they would pull him off the field if he was overly aggressive, if he drew a flag, even in the training camp setting when the refs were there. It was working those on his habits. And a die comes in, and when McDermott gave him praise, it's well deserved. You see him every single rep talking to Elam when Elam's on the field after the rep about, here's what you have to do at the stadium on Friday night when Elam was in at the outside cornerback position, even pre-snap, he'd be yelling, Kaiir, this, and Kaiir would acknowledge, thumbs up. He's very receptive to a die. I don't know the inner workings of the previous relationship with Butler. It just didn't seem like those two meshed well in terms of what the Bills are trying to do. A die, however, has come in, has really helped get the best out of Elam. He's still been this physical corner, but he has almost learned to be measured in that approach, knowing that if I'm overly physical, this is going to draw a flag 9 times out of 10. I can't do that. So he's also learned and developed, and that was the other part of McDermott's comment. It has to do with Kair's work ethic as well. He's come in, he's done all the right things, working on his own game to get better, but a die has been great for him.
Yeah, we got Ryan Talbot for a couple more minutes. This is a good question, actually, from the comments from John Robert. Who do you think is going to be doing punt returns? This is an area that has caught a little bit of attention, but there's not been a lot of conversation from the media, from anybody about kind of where this is. And the Bills don't really have a clear-cut punt returner. They're talking about the Hardy, the draft pick, right? I don't know what you've seen, what you've heard, but what are your thoughts right now? Like, who's in the running for, that punt returner position, or even kick returner?
Right. They haven't done a ton, honestly, at camp in terms of the drills. You see a lot of them when they work on the kickoffs, they're just catching the ball for the most part. Every now and then you'll see them run some things back, but they're rotating through a lot of guys. But the first name you mentioned, Daquan Hardy, is who I am predicting will be that punt returner for the team. Again, interesting comment from Sean McDermott at his presser on Sunday. When they talked about Hardy or mentioned Hardy, he said the main reason they drafted him was for his return ability. It wasn't for his cornerback play, where Emory Hunt, who does the football draft analysis, actually had Hardy as his top nickel cornerback in the draft. For the Bills, it wasn't so much the cornerback play, it was the returnability, which he did a nice job at Penn State in that regard too. Hardy, to his credit, is making his case to be maybe that top nickel corner behind Taron Johnson, to be that key backup. He's jumped a few routes, made a few interceptions, had a few PBUs over camp. He's
Siran Neal's gone, right? Siran Neal was that guy, so Siran Neal's gone now.
Yeah.
Right? Yep.
And they have Cam Lewis, who can play safety,
Right.
who can play nickel, who can play outside in a pinch. So he's another guy that was fighting for that job. But with the safeties being so banged up, you have to wonder if they're going to almost stick Lewis, at least early this season, more so in that safety room, a guy that they trust to know the playbook, that, they're hoping they don't have to put him out there for significant reps. They're trying to bring along some older players like a Kareem Jackson. They bring in a Terrell Burgess, who I don't think necessarily is going to make this roster, but as they're hoping for Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop to return, they probably will stick Cam Lewis more so in that safety room until those guys are all healthy. So Hardy has a good shot to be that backup nickel corner when the Bills release their first depth chart, which should be coming any day now, any minute now.
Yep.
Release them today. They might still bury some of the rookies on their depth chart. That's just kind of a common practice, but I've seen Hardy ascend in the defensive room as well, but I think he's my pick for punt returner this year.
We know what Daquan Jones can do. We know what Ed Oliver can do. The inside guys are as active as anybody in the league. How have, Austin Johnson, you talked a little bit about Dwayne Carter earlier, kind of going through maybe some rookie stuff like all rookies do. Deshaun Williams, those backups in that defensive tackle group, how are they looking right now as camp moves on?
I'll say Austin Johnson's just been solid, and that's exactly what you want from a backup rotational piece. This is a guy that's been in this league for many years. He hasn't necessarily, ascended into anywhere close to the Daquan Jones or Ed Oliver type level, which is tough to do. That's one of the best D tackle units in this league, starting units, that is. But he's been solid. He's had a solid camp. He'll be that top rotational guy on that second team, in my opinion. And then, Carter, I'm seeing more and more flashes from him in terms of getting even after the quarterback and causing the quarterback to get the ball out more, getting his hands up on plays, stuffing the run on the inside. He's had some nice plays there too. So you look at a year ago where Jordan Phillips wasn't the same player that he once had been. They brought in Tim Settle. Settle just didn't work out in Buffalo for whatever reason. I think the depth pieces here are better on paper. Obviously, we'll see in the preseason, regular season, how that goes. And then Deshaun Williams, I like his game. I think that the Bills are going to have an interesting decision on their hands in terms of, do you want to keep 5 D tackles, or do you want to go 4 and try to get Williams on your practice squad, which I think is a possibility, believe it or not. But even if he doesn't, Ilianku has had a really strong camp as of late. He has popped as well. So they have some options there. So when they're figuring out those final numbers, Williams might be on the right side of the bubble. I could still see him being on the wrong side as well. Preseason will determine a lot for him.
Awesome. Talking with Ryan Talbot. Ryan, we got one more question for you. Appreciate you being with us. We very much enjoy you on the program. So thank you so much for your time for this episode. But before I get to the last question, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your content, and just get all your information.
Yeah, you can find me on X or Twitter at Ryan Talbot Bills. You can find my work at nyup.com, syracuse.com. You can find the Shout podcast on YouTube, Facebook, X when we're live, but then obviously on your favorite podcast platforms as well.
Gotcha. Very, very good. It's interesting because I had one more question for you, and then John DeFazio just dropped this question in, which is a question for you. I can't help but notice that the offensive room seems lighter and more aligned. And I don't know, Jerry, if you've got opinions on this too. Is that due to personnel changes or coaching, or more due to those that have exited? So I'll toss it up to either of you real quick. Just make a quick answer.
Yeah, I think that, one, you've brought in a lot of new faces who haven't been here for the unfortunate way the last few seasons have ended in the playoffs. They haven't been here for some of the drama that maybe we haven't seen, or some of the sideline outbursts. So it definitely seems like a much lighter room in terms of the personalities, in terms of what you're seeing from these players. I've been very encouraged by the rapport that Allen has with all the guys. He's having his best training camp of his career, in my opinion. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that maybe there's a weight off of his shoulders.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, I think it's funny, and John, I'm not picking on you, but everybody's gotten really good at asking the Stephon Diggs question without using Stephon Diggs' name. It's funny. Amazing how good everybody's gotten.
That's funny. Yeah. So the real last question for you, Ryan. So when is the first cut down? I think there's only one cut down, right? Yeah, they changed that last year. And then we've asked this of every beat reporter that's come on recently. So when is cut down day, and then effectively surprise cut? Who's your right now surprise cut, the guy that's going to be on the outside looking in?
So you might see a few cuts right after the third preseason game. And then a few days after that is when they make all the cuts from 90 to 53. It's honestly, every team is different. Some just do one big dump of players and they say, here it is. Others do it, over the course of a few days to help maybe those players realize, or other teams realize, where potential opportunities are. In terms of players, like you mentioned, surprise cut would be Lyle Collins. I thought when they signed him, he had a good chance to stick on this roster as a depth piece. He played well over 100 games in this league, started for most of them, had been a solid player at tackle and guard. So I thought that he was going to be a definite addition. Haven't seen enough out of him to put him on that side of the ball. In terms of guys I could see making it, we've already mentioned the Shavers and Davidsons of the world. I'm going to go with Balin Spector, who I did not have on my initial 53-man roster.
I'm neither.
He's gotten some reps with the first team when guys have needed a spell. If it was a rest day for Milano, he's been in there at times. But I've just seen him making plays, which is something it's not been the knock on him. It's been health, and he's been healthy. He has not been one of these guys that has been day to day this summer that has missed time. Last year they even gave him a day with the starting unit to have him in that mix for the job that became Terrell Bernard's. But then after that one time, you never saw him again as the starter, but he also got dinged up. And
who is we talked about this on Sunday's show. Who is the backup Mike linebacker on this football team?
Well, I think that Dorian Williams has really stepped up his game. He's going to be someone that is going to, I think the Bills are going to trust him in terms of, you might see some 3 linebacker sets or even more 3 linebacker sets based on situations, obviously. It's going to be Williams' show. He is flying around. It's so funny. The linebacker position from year 1 to year 2, from what we saw from Terrell Bernard, he didn't play a lot as a rookie, but when he was out there as a rookie, he looked lost at times.
Yes.
Whether it's preseason, whether it was a few reps that he had during the regular season, looked lost. Had a full offseason to digest the playbook, to work on his game, to work on his strength, whatever the coaching staff told him to do. And you saw how he played last season. It's the same thing for Dorian Williams. He seemed, like he was over his head a little bit as a rookie. Year 2, he's looked great out there at training camp.
It's third down, in case anybody's wondering.
Between nearby 2 usually.
Third down here at Lime Lake, New York. It always comes by at this time, and when we do Hump Day Hotline, Spence loves it when the horns go off. He thinks it's hysterical. But I lied. I said one more question. It was 3. But Ryan, thank you so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen.
Ryan, I appreciate you.
Yeah, we're gonna get you out of here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us, for tuning into On the Beat exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe. Man, it's upon us, and I'm getting more every day that passes. I get more and more excited for this season. When I'll be honest with you, a couple months ago, I was like, I'm not really sure what to expect, but the Bills have pulled me in once again, as have the beat reporters. So thank you for being with us. Thank you, Jerry, for joining me. For me, for Jerry, for John, for all of us here at the Overreaction Sports Network. Go Bills.
Much love. Go Bills.
Much love. Go Bills. I was waiting for it, Jerry.